Hello, viewers. Welcome back.
No, Carlos, you
Product
got
placement.
This will change your life.
It's so
Product
stupid.
placement.
Change your life, bro.
What are you gonna
Digital
cook
delay.
on that? What are you gonna cook on that?
Alright, we're back with another album review. Today we're doing clippings, visions of body being burned. We do that. This is the
Let's fucking go.
rap trio outfit, experimental hip hop group consisting of
Hair clipping, grass clipping.
rapper David Diggs and two producers, William Hudson and Jonathan. It wouldn't be an official Chatmonster review if we didn't start off with the initial thoughts. A little curveball today.
So I guess since you really caught me off guard with that shit,
Initial thoughts.
Fuck. The first time I listened to it, I think they pulled together the aesthetic really well. Like I was expecting more of a narrative, I guess, but this album, I'm assuming, isn't. I've only listened to the clipping, the first album, their debut, so I'm assuming that this is not really a narrative. It's more of just like themes and playing with it. But after the first listen, at least, I was left a little bit wanting more from certain songs. There were songs that didn't have great hooks.
Let's see, this is my first time listening to clipping and like my first time really listening to experimental hip hop. The first time through, I was kind of I had trouble getting into it, because it's the most accessible, I think we can all agree. There's a lot of interesting things that they do and a lot of cool songs, I think, throughout the album.
Yeah, the first time I listened to it, it was a bit abrasive. I don't want to say like too abrasive because, I mean, if you look at the album cover, it's pretty, like it's just teeth on a black background, so you're gonna expect something. There were some aspects of it that I didn't really latch onto at first. Like when I first heard the rapping on the intro, he's very talented. You can tell he's a very talented rapper, but it's just like not my favorite flow to listen to. Interesting textures that flowed throughout the album. A lot of abrasiveness. Excuse my
Damn, Sky, you're dropping nuclear takes.
You got a whole bunch of experiences with this album. Is kind of interesting.
First listen, I love this record, and it only grew on me even more. Coming off of last year's record, which is also kind of a duet album, fitting that Halloween spooky vibe, aesthetic, whatever you want to call it. Very well done, but this one kind of just blew it out of the water, in my opinion.
The fact that I had no prior experience to clipping, so I didn't know if there was anything that I was missing on the first album of this duo.
I don't think there's much of a relationship other than the fact that they both have the same aesthetic and vibe, and both include scary stories and haunting atmospheres. This one is more plays out like a Twilight Zone, how every episode is on its standalone. But I thought intro was a great tone setter, pounding 808 marching hits, and then the increased time signature and flow to be Diggs, and then at the end he hits the classic "It's clipping bitch," and then just the absolute storm, just hurricane of all noise. I guess it kind of shows how non-accessible this album is going to be.
But it is kind of gatekeepy, which we're all gatekeepers of music. You already know what's going on. Me personally, I was not a fan of this intro song. I see a lot of parallels with their first album. I don't know if it's like this with their other albums. It's literally just like a carbon copy of the intro to clipping self-titled. And it was cool how the rhythms kind of played out, and it wasn't like 4/4 or whatever. It switched, and his flow kind of went off it. It was offbeat and stuff. It was definitely very technically sound. I mean, that's they're incredible. But I didn't think I felt like the 808 marching was sort of a trope. I feel like I've heard it before, and I feel like it just didn't do a lot that, I don't know, I feel like he could have just done it in a better way.
A lot of things they do on this album I think are really interesting, maybe innovative, but they aren't all things that I personally like to listen to. I didn't really like the wall of distortion. I mean, I didn't really love it in most cases on the album. It's just a little bit too much for me. This isn't really my thing. But besides that, I thought it was kind of a cool intro.
I kind of like the walking 808, and then again with his flow, it's just something that I'm not super into when it comes to listening to rap. I can totally appreciate how skilled he is to be able to rap in the way he does in the song. Shitstorm that comes on really is it was kind of crazy at first listen. For this album, I enjoyed being hit by it more the first time, just the not expecting it to come, and then all of a sudden.
I wonder how much of his stage training, singing and stuff he uses in his flow in his rapping, because it's definitely not traditional. We can see it's all kind of crazy. I wonder how much of it translates from the stage to the studio.
I'm sure some of it does. In a recent interview with Fantano and Clipping, there was a similar question that was proposed by the chat, and he pretty much answered no, it pretty much wasn't an influence from stage because he's been self-titled. He does bang out a lot of those crazy flows. and different time signatures that are just
So
completely
he's just like
impressive.
that.
Yeah, no, he's just built different. So
Yeah, he is.
I definitely see what you're saying, though, Evan. I would honestly push back against David's own take because I think that this album is like very theatrical, even though he definitely sticks to the ambient roots. I'm not saying like, oh, once he did Hamilton, he was a completely different artist because like he knows what the fuck he's doing. But I think that it probably has seeped into his creative process.
I think the one song, I think it was "Make Them Dead." Like it's a lot of like spoken word type delivery almost, and there's all kinds of different styles that you wouldn't normally see in rap, and this guy's a career that you wouldn't normally see in rap. So
yeah, David, come on the podcast and argue with me, bro.
And that's the game
about yourself.
The wall distortion, how either it was a bit too abrasive or you didn't really like it too much. I think that is probably like my slight complaint with this album. There are some parts or even songs that are just a little bit too much, and they're just piercing and just fatigue my ears a little bit too much that I can't really listen to them for a sustained amount of time. Yeah, I'd say Make Them Dead is definitely like I have to turn it down a little bit. Not to say that I don't enjoy it, but it's just a little bit too much on my ears.
the one I didn't really mind it on She Bad. The one for me was Body for the Pile. I thought there was a lot of abrasive noise on that one that kind of didn't sit well with me when I listened to it.
like, yeah, I think it was Eaten Alive or Body with the Pile. Like the drums are all like disjointed and like just like clattering noises and stuff. And then Make Them Dead is built off of like distortion and stuff, which is kind of cool. Distortion and clattering drums and all that makes the musical moments like sigh of like relief. It's like, oh, we made it to the music that makes it that much better. Not to say I didn't like these less musical songs.
And the longer ones that devolve into something more beautiful, like for example, Pain Every Day, where you get this beautiful string section, while the super distorted and glitchy drums are right there along with it, as well as 96 Nev Campbell that kind of just evolves into this weird like genre bending drum ending.
But I guess one of my major complaints with this album is that there wasn't enough of the dynamic contrast. I was actually a big fan of like the hit. I knew it was coming because it's literally like exactly like on the other album, but I wanted more of those dynamic moments. I wanted some quicker songs, and like for example on Eaten Alive, I really liked that kaleidoscope crazy noise symphony. Pretty interesting hook, pretty interesting lyrics. But it was just so long and it didn't hit any dynamic moments. On the other album, Clipping, like he has crazy moments, it'll like fast transition, then go to a really minimalist part, which he does do on many songs on here. But I feel like there wasn't enough like rapid songs, like ooh, just over, boom, next song, like next idea. Like sometimes there was like even on Make Them Dead, I feel like it even went on for a little bit too long. Maybe I wanted to hear maybe a wall of distortion or just like an abrupt ending or something.
The one moment that I did really like with the distortion, which at the end of Body for the Pile, it just is like this wall of distortion. It keeps going for like 30 seconds and then all of a sudden just cuts off. Creepy way to end the song. Like maybe it's like, oh, this is like the build up, this crescendo, this like chase scene where you're getting chased by a serial killer, and then all of a sudden it's done.
I agree with that. I remember that part. And I do like the interlude, like with the horror movie. I feel like they could have done a little bit more with the horror movie aesthetic or like putting in those type of samples. There's something that they don't work super well, like his type of flow, his type of delivery, like what he's going for, his very brainy lyrics don't often really mix with this like intensity. Like he's trying to make sort of like a horror movie soundtrack, and sometimes it just doesn't mix. Like I'm trying to focus on the words and then it's like, oh, it's building, and then I feel like the intensity wasn't always there. It kind of jumbled together with this brainy lyrics and his flow, which didn't always serve it.
I really like Make Them Dead, the like spoken word style, which is like totally different than you usually hear. I thought that was pretty cool.
Record after record delivers like impressive flows and word plays and different time signature. There was a song here that was in 7/8.
What the actual song was that was?
I think it was Something Underneath. On Something Underneath, it got the vibe that the verses were really like super upbeat, and it almost felt like someone was running away from something. And then the verse or the choruses where like the beat cuts out and it's just him doing the spoken word, is him kind of catching his breath, saying something's underneath, like the beat's off, like no birds in the trees. It's like I especially like the skit or the witchboard, which was the Ouija board, track, and they eventually spell out "He is here," and they go, "What does that mean?" And then it cuts into 96 Nev Campbell, the knocking.
It's
on
kind
the
of like just kind of like
board.
funny.
It brings in the best feature, no question. Cam and China on that track.
Yeah, these are great.
They freaking snapped on that track. Oh my god,
For sure, that was like that first verse, the first feature verse, was one of my favorite verses.
I thought
Yeah.
the second one was the best. I mean, it's not really a break from the abrasiveness because it's at the beginning of the album, but it is a break because there's so many other songs that are abrasive, and this is more of a traditional rap song to maybe ease a listener who's not so into experimental stuff.
The hook on that song really made it. I really liked how they bounced off each other. A lot more interesting than the other hook from the other, I guess, more traditional in the first half songs.
Say the name.
I was not a fan of the visions of bodies being burned, kind of just very cliche sampling there, just
Dropping it down a key or whatever.
I thought the Say the Name hook was really cool because the rhythm of the hook is not, it feels like it's off by like an eighth note.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys on that because on the one hand, I feel like the
Like, pitch down vocal is very
overused in a lot of hip hop songs, but I did really enjoy the way the rhythm was made around that. I didn't know if this was related to anything like, the social sphere. I feel like Say the Name is very weighted, phrase right now.
I definitely think that that's very interesting. You bring up the Say the Name. I guess I didn't think of the Say the Name phrase exactly in that context.
Tatum,
But I did definitely think that the body's being burned. I think it's like a pretty simple metaphor, but it's like, about like the gangster check the lock, about all these people running from horror movies. But really the slasher is, America, police brutality, systemic racism. And I think that it's definitely something that needs to be said. And I think it's straight to the point, like anyone can pick up on it. That being said, I didn't like the actual song Bodies for the Pile. I think that it was kind of a goofy, again, I guess it was just too goofy of a hook to mix, the crazy horror movie soundtrack feel. It's really clashing with like the serious tone, but like it didn't feel like that tongue in cheek. It was just like kind of goofy.
Because he might, if it is political commentary, he might just not be trying to make it like so glaringly obvious, that it's in your face. He might just be trying like, here, it's a little metaphor here, but you can still enjoy the song. I would have liked to see another more musical song or traditional song in the second half. I felt like by the time I got past like Check the Lock, it was kind of, the songs just kind of like melded together.
It comes down to, the second half, the latest songs I actually really love. In Lacings, that's like my favorite song.
Yeah, I like the last two as well.
Eaten Alive for me, probably my least favorite song. A lot of cool lyrics here, and it's sort of interesting, like stepping into the swamp with your gaiters on, interesting juxtaposition. You felt like you were in the swamp. It did establish the move, crazy percussion off the wall.
There's like at the end, there's like 2 minutes of like random
but it's
percussion.
just too long. It was just too long, and his flow was just so slow.
When I listened to
What?
when I listened to Drove, I was like, "Is this Animals by Pink Floyd right now? Like, what are we doing?" After Check the Lock, which I really liked a lot of the melodies and the bass line on that one. I think after that, it did get a little bit not repetitive because a lot of them were very different from each other in the noises and their texturing to overbearing for me at least.
I don't think I felt fatigued by the end of it. I thought there was a lot of switch ups.
Favorites and least favorites?
Yeah,
or?
favorites, least favorites.
I guess in Lacings, but I think in Lacings and Check the Lock, just really good soundscapes. Check the Lock sounded like an ASAP Rock song. My least favorite in Eaten Alive easily and Body for the Pile.
I'll do my dislikes first because they're the same as Victor's. And my favorites, I'm going to go with Say the Name and Make Them Dead.
Popular opinion here, apparently. I didn't really like Eaten Alive or Body for the Pile. Those are my two least favorites. The percussive sounds on Eaten Alive were my favorites. Favorites of the whole album.
The whole album?
Yeah, the entire
no
album.
No way.
Their entire discography that I've listened to
Okay.
would be 96, also in Lacing.
So my least favorites, if I were to have to pick two, would have to be Eaten Alive. I agree that part is a little bit like too much at the end. Make Them Dead. I think the distortion on that one is a little bit too much.
Give me
Something
Head.
Underneath. Check the Lock. Those
I knew
are
you were
my-
going to. I'm going to give it a 7.
6.8.
I'm gonna give it a 6.5.
I'm going to have to give this album a 9.4.
He turned the six
Damn,
upside down.
these are
and
my
said,
own.
"I
Holy
know."
shit.
Honestly, just don't comment on this video. This video is trash.
Yeah, don't comment on this.
I actually think
video.
this is one of our I think this is one of our best reviews that we've done.
Comment your favorite horror movie down below.
And the year it was.
I'm at your
made.
favorite experimental hip hop album for me to not listen to. Maybe I should listen to Death Grips now that I listen to Clipping.
Yeah.
I mean, MC Ride is basically JPEG Mafia, so I've already listened to it.